Hi, I'm Mike London, and I'm the director of the Ohio Playwrights Circle, a service organization for playwrights. Over the years, I've read lots of good books on playwriting. There are some wonderful educators that have been guiding writers across the theater communities. This series of interviews is a chance for each of us to get to know some of those educators and their approach to storytelling. Today, I want you to meet Stuart Spenser, the author of the Playwrights Guidebook. I've used his book in many classes over the years. If you don't have a copy, get one. It's a great resource. I hope you enjoy.
My first job, actually, I had an internship right out of college at a theater, a small theater in Manhattan called the Ensemble Studio
Yes.
Theater, which is still there, and they do all new work. And so I worked in the literary department and ultimately was hired in the literary department and ultimately became the literary manager of the theater. And that job, to me, is a thankless job. I didn't like being literary manager. What you do all day is read scripts and write letters and say, no, we're not going to do your play. And I found that to be, as a playwright, I thought, gosh, this is really kind of enervating and not very inspiring and just kind of not my scene. But part of being, once you rose to the level of literary manager, you were expected to teach a course in the institute. The theater had a wing, a teaching wing called the Institute of Professional Training. And you were, just sort of expected to do that as literary manager. And so I thought, oh, okay, well, I guess I can do that. And I walked out of the first class that I taught and said to myself, that's how I want to make my money. And I promptly resigned as literary manager, not immediately, but I think filled out that year or something, or that season, and left and embarked on a teaching career. I mean, teaching is an artistic experience in itself, or at least it should be. It's obviously part pedagogy, but in teaching playwriting, you're also thinking like an artist and dealing with artists and helping them to realize their vision. That's a very positive thing to do and a very rewarding thing to do. And it isn't necessarily even dependent on the fact that they're, particularly good playwrights or great playwrights. Obviously, lots and lots of people would come take the class. It was just something fun to do for them. Why not? I'll go learn how to write play. Last year was macrame. Next year it's going to be finger painting. This year I'm going to learn to write plays. It's still an artistic experience for them and for me, and that in itself is rewarding. And I still feel exactly the same way as I did then. I now teach on the college level, and I do some private, consultation work and so forth. But it's always about saying, yes, we can do this. We can make this work. There's always a way to make it work. And let's figure out what that thing is. What are you trying to do? And let's figure out how you can do it. Well, I think empathy. You have to be interested in what the writer is doing, not in what you're doing, not in what you would do with this play or what you would like to see in this play. You really have to let go of that and invest in what they're trying to do. Your job, one's job, my job as a writing teacher is to get inside the head of the playwright, which is, by the way, why I don't really give notes in general. I never have a note giving session. Like, we read the play and then the playwright sits there and dutifully writes down all of the brilliant things that I am telling them about their play.
I agree with you. I would say the same.
Because what we read, what we heard, or what I read in the play is one thing, but what's in the playwright's head is a whole nother thing. And I don't know what's in the playwright's head. All I know is the words that they put on the paper. That's all I know. Well, I want to find out what's in their head. I want to find out what they're doing. Why are they writing this play? What's it about for them? Where did it come from? What do they think it's about? What do they think happens? Here, I'll tell them, I'll say, this is what I think happens in your play, but what do you think happens in your play? And what do you think ought to happen in your play? What are you trying to make happen in your play? In other words, it's all about digging down and having a conversation with the playwright and finding out their intentions, their needs, their worries, their fears, their subconscious, their, I'll point things out to people. I'll say, this play is all about, you and your mother. And yet at the very beginning, I have a student who's writing this play right now. He's got big mother problems. And the play is a play about that. But there's one line at the very beginning of the play that says, having no father, I made Cyrus the Great into my surrogate sort of fantasy father, because this guy is Iranian. And I said, it's interesting that it's not just that there's no father in the play. There is a father in the play, but it's this big blank space where there should be a father. And what does it mean, having no father? That sounds like the guy never had a father. That's something you would say when you never knew your father. Well, what happened to that father? Did he die? Did he abandon the family? Having no father is not true. This character does have a father. This character may not know him, may not know who he is or whatever, but he's definitely got one. He may be dead, but he's got one. I said, I accept that the play is on some level about this guy and his mother, but I think this play is also about this guy and his father, isn't it? And he goes, and I said, okay, so now let's talk about that, right? So, I mean, that is me obviously inserting myself, but with some reason, and also I'm not insisting that it be about his father. I'm just pointing out it does seem to be in fact about his father, because he gets obsessed with Cyrus the Great, and we go back 2,500 years to Cyrus the Great, and Cyrus the Great, it turns out, also had a very complicated relationship with his mother in a very parallel way to my writing student and his mother that he's writing about. And Cyrus the Great also had big father problems. I said, again, this father thing keeps turning up no matter where we look. There's fathers. They're never on stage and we never hear anything about them, but they're always there. And so that really connected with him. And we had a great conversation, and I began to understand, and he began to understand more about what his play was really about. So those kinds of conversations are absolutely essential. It's not enough to just sort of, say as a teacher, oh, I see what you're doing, let me help you do it. You don't know what they're doing always. It may seem very obvious what they're doing to you, and you may be totally wrong. That's not at all what they were going for. They were going for something totally different. So the empathy, yes, empathy, but the empathy has to be based on knowledge. It has to be based on the teacher's knowledge about what this play inside that playwright's head is doing, and what is the difference between what's in their head and what's on the page. And the teacher's job is to get them to be the same thing. I would say, I guess the hardest challenge is to convince people that they don't have to know what they're doing in order to do it well. In other words, I really believe in the early stages of a play, the rough draft or first draft, the stuff that's coming out at the beginning. You really don't have to know what it's all about. And you don't have to have it planned. You don't have to have decided already, this is what is going to happen in my play, and this is what my play is going to be about, and et cetera. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing. It does work for some people, and some people like to work that way. But mostly, I think it's a lot better to not know, because you have to give it over to the subconscious. That's really who writes plays, is the subconscious mind. Conscious mind is very, very good at looking at what you've done and saying, oh, that's nice, and that's not so nice, and that I can work with, and that's no good, and that really needs development, and that really needs cutting, and so forth. It's very good at that, and obviously need that side of our brain. But the work, the actual writing itself, as much as you can do it, should be subconscious. And of course, it gets more and more difficult the more you get into a play and you're now doing the 10th draft. Well, how do you stay spontaneous and stay subconscious when you're working within a very tight parameter? You've got to fix this scene. But even in fixing the scene, you have to still allow for the possibility of surprising yourself, and that something's going to happen to the scene that you didn't know was going to happen. Something new will appear, and the only way to get it to appear is to give it over to the subconscious, because your conscious mind will always plan it. They'll always know what's going on. It always knows, it thinks what's best, and only the subconscious mind, it's where we dream. We dream in our subconscious, right? And so it's always ready to surprise you. Because it doesn't care. It doesn't care about the the imperatives of the real world and problems. The subconscious does what it wants to do, and that's a beautiful thing. And I think the more experienced you are as a playwright, the more you can allow yourself to plan, because you understand that at the end of the day you've got to go back and let yourself be spontaneous, even within the plans that you've made. A tough problem is generally in my head all the time anyway. It's very hard to get rid of it. And so when it comes time to go to bed, it's kind of there of its own matter. I'm not thinking about anything else, so it immediately comes into my head. But I do deliberately think about it and sort of go through the problem. I don't try to solve the problem, but I try to understand what the problem is. Like, what am I really trying to wrestle with here? And go to sleep thinking of that. And indeed, I often wake up with something anyway. It may, as you say, it may not be the solution, it may not be everything, but at least you've got a little crack in the armor, and you can kind of begin to work it and open it up a bit. And I would also say, I think on a similar kind of note, it's often very good to work on a problem, really think about it, try to solve it, try to come up with different solutions very intensely for however long, a day or two, or several, and then go do something totally different. Maybe not even work on the play at all, or if you are, work on some other aspects of the play, something that has nothing to do with this particular problem, for, again, who knows how long, but a few days, a week, something like that, and then come back and look at it. And so many times you're like, oh, of course, why didn't I see that a week ago? But you couldn't, because you were so in it. Somehow putting it in your head and letting it kind of bake, and then returning to it works. And I think it's the same principle, that at night it's baking in your subconscious. And in some ways, if you're deliberately putting it out of your head for the several days, your subconscious undoubtedly is still working away at it. The subconscious is a very mysterious thing, and I think it's working away even when you don't know it. I try to make it so that there isn't. Okay. The big difference, obviously, is you give grades and evaluations and credit in college. And so but that's actually a problem. And I'm blessed actually to teach at Sarah Lawrence, where technically we don't have grades. We do, because people want to go to grad school and get jobs and things. But officially within Sarah Lawrence, there are no grades. It's all evaluation based. And so I get to talk about the playwright. I don't have to worry about anything except a discussion about what they're doing. and it's a liability in some ways, the whole grade thing. I always tell my students, forget, I'm totally guilty of grade inflation, because I don't care, no one is ever going to do well as a playwright because they got an A in my class and not do well because they got a C minus. I mean, please, it's ridiculous. No one cares about grades in playwriting classes. They care whether somebody learned how to write a play. So I say, look, you're getting a good grade. That's not the issue. Let's talk about your play. Let's just make it an issue of your play and what we're going to do with that. And so in some ways, I kind of try to make my university classes more like, private workshops and so forth, because it's just the only artistic way to do it. They can't feel as though I'm standing over them, with a stick ready to beat them when they're bad. You just don't get good work out of people that way. They have to feel as though they are being empowered to do what they want to do. And that's what I spend most of my time doing. Just do what you want to do. And it's, I mean, not literally, because this woman who's writing a play about God, Mr. Peterson, she doesn't want to do that. But what I'm trying to say to her is, you do want to do it. You're just not letting yourself want to do it. There it is. It's big as day. The guy writing, this Persian guy who's writing about fathers and mothers, but really about fathers. Once I pointed out that it was really very much about fathers also, he was like, oh, right, of course, So it's what they want to do. There's the play you want to write, and there's the play you need to write. And it's the play you need to write that you got to pay attention to. And that as a teacher, you can be the person that says, I think this is the play you need to write. Maybe not the one you wanted to write, but it's the one that's coming out of you. So that's what I would say. I sometimes have great sympathy for my early students. I wasn't very good. I think I always cared, and I think I had one very good thing going for me as a teacher always, which was that I'm not interested in them writing the play that I want them to write. I don't care about that. I write my own plays. That satisfies that need in me. And instead, I'm interested in what they're doing and really getting into it. That, to me, that's the excitement of it, is that I get to get into other people's heads and into other plays that are not my play and find out what it's trying to do, and then help the playwright do that. So I think I always had that. But oh my gosh, I mean, just so many, actors talk about their chops, right? Just the technical ability to do something, and playwrights have chops too, and so do teachers. And I didn't have very many, and I didn't really understand. I didn't have a deep understanding and knowledge of what went into writing plays. I was still very young myself. I mean, my gosh, I was maybe 27. There are a million other things that I've learned and I've come through over the years, and it's because I was teaching. Because in the process of trying to help people, I would run into things. I think, I don't know how to help this person. I don't know what to. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say to them. They have all my sympathy, but I can't help them. And now, I would say, there's still people I can't help. It's always going to be the case, but almost always I can at least say something. And if I can't, I also now know to say, I can't help you with this. This is a kind of play or a style or something that I just don't know anything about. And you're going to have to go to somebody. Nonlinear work, for instance, is not my thing. Plays that have no setting, no characters, no story, they're kind of abstractions to me. I don't like that kind of theater very much, but I don't like it probably because I also don't understand it, and I don't understand it because I don't like it. And so if somebody comes in with a piece like that, I just say, look, to me, this is a different art form. You need to go find somebody who can address that. So I know how to do that also, and I know the difference between things I understand and things that I don't understand. Another thing that I also know how to do now is I can look at something that really, it just has no dramatic stuff in it. It just is, it may be interesting in some ways, characters, settings, language, themes, whatever, may be really fascinating in some ways, but no drama. And I can almost always find the drama in it because it's almost always really there. It's just been suppressed in some way. It's been or ignored or something. But if you can tease that little idea of the playable action out of that, you can really do something. And I'm quite good at that. I've gotten quite adept at that. And I love doing it. Again, I think it's the pleasure of doing that really drives me. The money also is nice. The paycheck is very pleasant, but it really is. I always am amazed how I never lose interest in doing that. My husband is not a playwright, not a writer, anything like that. And he often says to me, oh, you're working too hard, or you've done so much, or do you really have to do that? And I say, well, I don't really have to, but I kind of want to. I mean, you give me a play and you say, I'm having a problem with it. I am already there. I'm like, okay, I have to help you. I want to help you. I'm fascinated by this. And I genuinely am. I don't always love reading the plays. That I find very hard work. To read through a script is hard work. It's always been hard work, and it always will be for me. But once I finished it, and I'm now talking to the playwright about it, that is pure pleasure. I could do that for hours, because it just is so fascinating to me to get in their heads and find out what are they really thinking about this piece, and what are they really trying to do with it. And those are all skills that I did not have when I began.